Over the years, we have people constantly say, well, I always hear you make references to Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, so we started it, and it just got bogged down, I just couldn't get into it. And I say, where did you start? And usually people say, we started with the book The Hobbit. And I always say, Kathy and I always say, that was your mistake. The Hobbit is a children's book, and then comes the 3 books of the trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. And I was listening to a literary critic who knows these books and says, the thing you've got to keep in mind is The Hobbit is an adventure, but The Lord of the Rings is a quest. The Hobbit book is a book for children, and it's more lighthearted, and it's an adventure. And the way the literary critic defines adventure is, he says, an adventure is a there and back again. It's an exciting thing that you choose. And you go and you have your adventures, and you have all your thrills, and it spices up your life, and then you come home again and you pick your life up again where it left off. An adventure is there and back again. But a quest is not something you choose, it comes to you. You sense a requirement. You're called to it because of what's involved. And you never really come back from a quest. In a quest, you either die for the quest, or if you do come back, you're so changed that you never, in a sense, come back. You're never the way you were. You change so radically. Now, I want you to know, Christianity is not an adventure. I mean, obviously, I'm using the term technically, because in another way, in a more general way, you can use the word adventure and it be valid. But as I'm using the words right now, Christianity is not an adventure. It's not there and back again. It's not like I want to have some fun. I want to enrich my life. Christianity is a quest. God says, get out. You're going to be radically changed. Don't ask me whether or not what I'm about to do will fit into your agenda. Christianity is a whole new agenda. Don't say, how is this going to enrich my life? Christianity is a whole new life. What does it mean to answer the call? It's to get out, not knowing where you're going. That's what Hebrews 11:8 says. Hebrews 11:8 summarizes Genesis 12 like this. God said to Abram, get out. And so he went out, not knowing whither he went, not knowing where he was going. And unless you say to the Lord, whatever I discern as your will, I will do unconditionally from here on in, you're not a Christian. You haven't answered the call. You're not a Christian to say, I will obey if it looks like it fits in. You're not a Christian until you've taken your hands off your life. It's volitionally radical. Thirdly, it's missionally radical. Now, why do I use the word missionally? Well, look at the third part. It's personally radical, you got to meet him yourself. It's volitionally radical, you've got to surrender your will, take your hands off your life. But it's missionally radical. Look at this. I will bless you. But why? That you may be a blessing. Because through you, all the families and peoples of the earth will be blessed. To become a Christian is to be changed so that now you are not making your decisions on the basis of what is the most comfortable for me, where do I live that's most comfortable, what job do I take that's the best for my for my safety and my comfort and my influence and my status. You don't make your decisions like that anymore. The call of God reshapes you, so you're asking yourself the question, where can I most be a blessing? See, the call of God goes like this. If you seek to be blessed, you'll be empty. If you seek to bless others, I'll bless you. If you live for the blessing of others, if you live to fill others up, I'll fill you, says God. I will bless you that you may be a blessing. God only blesses that you may be a blessing. And you say, well, then how can I be a blessing? The answer is you got to get out. Get out, and I will bless you that you may be a blessing. Let me show you how that works. What does it mean to get out of your country? What does it mean to get out of your family? What does it mean? It means to get out of your security zone. Get out of your comfort zone. It means to get out of the familiar. And let me show you how this works. Let me give you a case study. I'm constantly running into people, Christians, when I go around the country, who say, why in the world would you raise your family in New York City? What a terrible place. It's financially uncomfortable. It's physically uncomfortable. This is living in New York. It is. Subway, even your apartment, Then they're getting across. It's physically uncomfortable. It's financially uncomfortable. Everything is more complicated. But here's an interesting thing. I've been here 12 years now, and therefore, you certainly know, I'll say it once, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Not everybody's called to live in New York. Not everybody's called to stay in New York. I mean, you may get called to another place where you can use your gifts better than here, and that's where you need to go. But one thing I've always noticed is when I meet somebody who lived in New York and came to Redeemer, say, for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 6 years, and now they're somewhere else, I have yet to talk to somebody who didn't say this. New York was the least comfortable place I've ever lived, and it was the most useful place I've ever felt I was useful. In other words, it was the place where I felt the most useful, but it was the place where I was the most uncomfortable. Where we are now is much more comfortable. We have a nice big house. We feel more safe. We're surrounded by people who are just like we are. We don't have the issues that face you every day in New York. And we don't feel anywhere near as much as we're on the front lines or as we're useful in other lives of other people. Well, it shouldn't surprise you. This is what God says. God says, if you're willing to get out, I'll make you a blessing. If you want to stay in safety, if you want to keep a tidy, manageable, comfortable little life, you're not going to be of much use to anybody. I mean, that's in the macro and the micro. Right now, in your life, there are people around you that need for you to tell them the truth about something, and you're scared. You won't do it. You know why? You don't want to get out of your safety zone. You don't want to be criticized. You don't want to look bad. You don't want to risk looking bad or risk making yourself vulnerable to criticism, right? You don't want to do that. As a result, you're not able to bless them. Here's how it works. The call of God works like this. To the degree you're willing to get out of the familiar, get out of the safe, get out of the comfortable, to that degree, God says, I will bless you in order that you may be a blessing. I'll appear to you. I'll come into your life. So the call of God is personally radical. Secondly, it's volitionally radical. Thirdly, it's missionally radical. I ought to say one more thing, because I put a quote in the front about this, but I'll be real brief about this. The call of God is culturally radical. And boy, I tell you, when people tell me that the gospel gives you pat answers, I just know they don't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry, that sounds disrespectful, but I have to say it. Abraham left, but never arrived. You know that? I know it says he arrived at Canaan, but here's the whole point of the story of Abram. He is told, leave your people and leave your nation and leave your culture and go to another land where I will make you to be a nation, make you to be a new culture. But Abraham himself never actually gets it. He never sees it, right? He lives his entire life in a huge gap between promise and reality. And that's very uncomfortable. It would have been more comfortable if he'd stayed in Ur. It would be more comfortable if he actually arrived in a nation filled with his descendants, but he never is there. Now, what's interesting is that whenever Paul talks about what it means to be a Christian in Galatians and Romans, he's continually referring not to Moses and not to David, but to Abraham. When Paul got into this controversy, when he began to win Greeks and Romans to Christ, and the Jewish Christians back in Jerusalem said, well, now that they're Christians, they need to be culturally Jewish. They need to wear Jewish things and eat Jewish things, and they need to be culturally Jewish. And Paul said, no. They are changed. They're Christian Greeks, they're Christian Romans, but they're Christian Greeks, and they're Christian Romans. And what it means to hear the call of God is very uncomfortable. And this is the way Miroslav Volf puts it in summarizing what Abraham means. He says, the courage to break his cultural and familial ties and abandon the gods of his ancestors out of allegiance to a God of all families and all cultures was the original Abrahamic revolution. In the same way, Christians depart from their original culture. Christians can never first of all be Asians or Americans or Russians or Tutsis, and then Christians. Christians are Christians first. Christians take a distance from the gods of their own culture, and because they give their ultimate allegiance to the gods of all cultures, to the God of all cultures and his promised future. But now in Christ, departure is no longer a spatial category. It takes place within the cultural space one inhabits. It involves neither a modern attempt to build a new heaven out of the world, nor a postmodern restlessness that fears to arrive anywhere. When Christians respond to the call of the gospel, they put one foot outside their culture while the other remains firmly planted in it. Christians' distance is not flight from one's original culture, but a new way of living within it because of the new vision of peace and joy they have in Christ. See, it is vastly easier to leave your culture and say, I'm a Christian now, I want nothing to do with you. Or to stay in your culture and say, I'm this first, and Christianity is sort of a peripheral kind of hobby that helps me enrich my private life. No. Here's what's so bad, and here's what's so great. The call of God makes you a cultural pilgrim. It says, stay with your people, but be a Christian member of that old society. Which means it's very hard work. It's very hard work. It's exciting work. Like Abraham, you depart, but you don't arrive. You've been pulled out somewhat of your home culture, you know? I mean, what if you're a wasp, huh? What if you're a northeastern wasp? Thin thighs, blonde hair, okay, headband, all right? You went to boarding school, you went to Harvard and Yale. You're not just like the rest of them. You're a Christian, and yet, what are you supposed to do? Ditch the headband? If you ditch the headband, you're going to pick up somebody else's cultural thing. You're African American, you're Asian, you're Latin American. When you're a Christian first, and you're Latin American second. You're a Christian first, and you're Asian second. You're a Christian first, and you're African American second. But you're an Asian Christian. You're an Asian Christian, which means you have to be Abraham. One foot in your culture, yet a transformed Christian member of that culture. It'd be far easier to just get out of it or stay completely in it. But God says, get out. And yet, you don't arrive somewhere else. And therefore, the call of God is personally radical, volitionally radical, missiologically radical, and culturally radical.
Be the light in the crack. Be the one that's been in the camel's back. Slow to anger, quick to laugh. Be more heart and less attack. Be the wheels, not the track. Be the wonder that's coming back. Leave the past right where it's at. Be more heart and less attack. The more you take, the less you have. You in the mirror staring back. Quick to let go, slow to react. Be more heart and less attack. Ever growing, steadfast. And if need be, the one that's in the gap. Be never turning back. Twice the heart any man could have. Not the track, be the wonder that's coming back. Leave the past right where it's at. Be more heart and less attack. Be more heart and less attack. Be more heart and less attack.